The arrival of Captain Elias and the Galactic Exchange. The Galactic Exchange program was initiated to promote peace and understanding between species after centuries of tension. Captain Elias Thorne, a seasoned human with a calm demeanor but piercing eyes, was assigned to represent humanity on the Celestra station, a hub of interstellar diplomacy and education. His mission was simple: teach alien students about Earth's medical advancements and survival techniques. Aliens from across the galaxy filled the lecture halls, their physiology ranging from crystalline bodies to floating jelly-like forms. The humans were still considered Deathworlders, species that evolved on planets so dangerous they were practically mythical to others. This made them both admired and feared. Captain Elias began with a calm smile. "Let's talk about survival and first aid," he said, his voice steady and warm. The room fell silent, all eyes, some glowing, others on stalks, focused on the human. "On Earth," Elias explained, "our environment constantly pushes us to adapt. Our tools are not just about survival, they're about saving lives in the most extreme conditions." He pulled out a compact first aid kit, showing its simple yet effective components. "This is what keeps us alive, even when everything around us tries to kill us." When a student, a feathered alien named Terex, raised a wing, Elias encouraged the question. "How does something so small save lives on a death world?" Terex asked skeptically. Elias demonstrated a tourniquet on his arm, explaining how it stopped bleeding. The aliens gasped as he tied it tightly. "This isn't just a tool," Elias said. "It's a symbol of our determination to persist." As he continued, Elias shared stories of human resilience, like astronauts surviving space disasters and climbers braving deadly blizzards. Each tale left the alien students in awe, their respect for humans growing. By the end of the first lecture, Terex murmured to another student, "Humans. They might be the galaxy's most terrifying and most inspiring species." The test of trust. The second session with Captain Elias began with a surprise. Instead of launching into another lecture, Elias presented the students with a challenge. The large, circular room was suddenly transformed into a simulation of a disaster zone, a fractured spaceship corridor, dimly lit with flickering lights and simulated fires. "This," Elias announced, gesturing to the chaos, "is your test today. You will experience what humans face in extreme conditions and learn how we adapt under pressure." The alien students exchanged nervous glances. Terex, the feathered alien, fluffed his feathers in unease. Beside him, Vecta, a crystalline being who emitted faint glowing pulses, muttered, "This seems unnecessarily harsh." Elias remained calm, his gaze steady. Adaptation begins with understanding. The first rule in any survival scenario is to remain calm. You'll be working in teams to rescue a simulated victim and stabilize their condition. Follow my guidance, and you'll all succeed. The aliens paired off, their natural instincts guiding them to choose partners with complementary strengths. Terex and Vecta formed an unlikely duo, their avian agility and crystalline precision contrasting sharply. They ventured into the simulated disaster zone, their nerves on edge. The simulation was more than a test, it was a controlled chaos designed to push the students. Smoke like mist filled the air, and the sounds of distant explosions echoed, creating an eerie realism. Elias's voice came through their comms, steady and reassuring. "Remember, observe your surroundings first. Look for threats and resources." Terex scanned the room with his sharp eyes. "There," he cried, pointing to a fallen structure under which a simulated victim, a holographic humanoid, lay trapped. Vecta moved swiftly, her crystalline limbs gleaming in the dim light. "We need to lift this beam." "Can you manage?" she asked, her voice resonating like chimes. "I'll try," Terex said, his feathers trembling. Together, they lifted the beam with difficulty. As they freed the victim, Elias's voice cut through the tension. "Now stabilize them. Check for breathing and injuries. Quick but thorough." Terex hesitated, unsure of what to do. Vecta's glowing body emitted a calming pulse. We need to remember what Captain Elias showed us. Tourniquets, bandages, breathing checks. With trembling hands, Terex applied a makeshift bandage to the victim's simulated wound. The moment was tense, but as the task progressed, the aviant's movements became steadier. "We're stabilizing them," he said, his voice brimming with newfound confidence. Meanwhile, Elias watched the scene from the control room, a small smile playing on his lips. The students, though unfamiliar with the techniques, were adapting quickly. "They're learning," he murmured to himself. As the simulation came to an end, the students gathered, exhausted but proud. Elias stepped forward, his posture firm yet encouraging. "You did well. You worked together, stayed calm, and adapted. That's what survival is about." Terex couldn't contain his excitement. "We saved them. We actually saved them." Vecta's glowing body pulsed brighter, a sign of her species' equivalent of a smile. "Perhaps humans aren't as reckless as we thought." Elias chuckled. "Reckless? Maybe a little. But we're reckless because we refuse to give up. That's the spirit of humanity." The aliens nodded, their initial skepticism fading into admiration. In their eyes, humans were not just Deathworlders, they were a species defined by hope and perseverance, even in the face of chaos. A lesson in sacrifice. The third session was different. The simulation room was dark and silent, creating a sense of foreboding among the students. Captain Elias entered, carrying a small, worn object, a simple leather journal. His expression was more serious than before. "Today, we'll talk about sacrifice," Elias began, his voice calm but weighted. "Survival is about more than just staying alive. It's about making choices, hard choices, to ensure others can live." The students listened intently. Even Terex, who often fidgeted, was completely still. The journal in Elias's hands seemed almost sacred. "This," Elias said, holding up the journal, belonged to a man named Dr. Adrian Burke. He was a field medic during one of Earth's most devastating wars. His story is one I carry with me because it reminds me of the lengths we go to for each other." Elias opened the journal and began to read. His voice transported the students to a battlefield on Earth, centuries ago, a place of smoke, fire, and unrelenting chaos. Dr. Burke had been stationed on a desolate planet during the War of Terran Unity, a conflict that nearly fractured humanity. His job was simple in theory but harrowing in practice: save as many lives as possible, no matter the cost. One fateful day, his unit was ambushed. Burke and his team were caught in the crossfire, pinned down in a narrow ravine with no escape. He worked tirelessly, tending to soldiers with shattered limbs and burned flesh, all while bullets whizzed overhead. Elias's voice grew quieter, drawing the students closer. But then the situation worsened. A grenade was thrown into their midst, landing near a group of wounded soldiers who couldn't move. Dr. Burke had only seconds to react. Terex leaned forward, his feathers bristling. What did he do? Elias paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. He did what most wouldn't dare. He threw himself onto the grenade. Gasps filled the room. Even Vecta's crystalline form dimmed, reflecting the collective shock. Elias nodded solemnly. The grenade exploded, and Dr. Burke absorbed the blast. He saved the lives of those soldiers, but at the cost of his own. The room was silent, the weight of the story pressing on every student. Elias closed the journal and set it down gently. This is what I mean by sacrifice. It's not about recklessness or bravado. It's about deciding that someone else's life is worth more than your own in that moment. One student, a reptilian named Gareth, raised a clawed hand. But why? Why would anyone do that? Elias looked directly at Gareth, his eyes piercing but kind. Because humans value the collective over the individual in moments of crisis. We believe in the potential of others, even if it means we might not see the outcome ourselves. Terex, still processing the story, asked hesitantly, "Do all humans think that way?" Elias smiled faintly. "Not all. But many of us do when it matters most. It's not about being fearless, it's about choosing courage over fear." The students sat quietly, the gravity of the lesson sinking in. For them, sacrifice was a concept often reserved for legends or tales of heroism. To hear it as a practical reality was both humbling and awe-inspiring. As the session ended, Elias left them with a final thought. Sacrifice isn't just about giving up your life. It's about giving up comfort, security, or even pride to ensure someone else can live another day. That's what it means to be human. The students departed the room in silence, their admiration for humanity deepening. For Terex and the others, humans were no longer just Deathworlders, they were something far more profound. They were beings of hope, resilience, and selflessness. The unseen strength. The next lesson took the students to a new part of the Celestra station, one designed to simulate extreme environments. Captain Elias stood at the entrance, waiting for the group to gather. Behind him loomed the entrance to an ice cavern simulation, its shimmering walls glowing faintly blue. "Today," Elias began, his voice steady as ever, "we'll talk about strength. Not just physical strength but the unseen strength that keeps us alive in the harshest conditions." Terex glanced uneasily at Vecta. "This doesn't look friendly." Elias smiled. "It's not supposed to. Survival rarely is." The students were paired into small groups and sent into the simulation. Their task: navigate the treacherous ice tunnels, retrieve a simulated power core, and return it to the starting point. The challenge wasn't just about physical endurance, it was a test of mental fortitude and teamwork. Into the ice caverns. Terex and Vecta worked their way through the slick corridors, their breath fogging the frigid air. The cavern walls seemed to pulse with an eerie light, casting long, dancing shadows. The chill was intense, even for species accustomed to cooler climates. "We're not built for this," Vecta said, her glowing form dimming as the cold sapped her energy. "Neither are humans," Terex muttered, his feathers puffing up in a futile attempt to retain warmth. "But they still survive it somehow." As they rounded a corner, they encountered a steep incline coated in a thin sheet of ice. At the bottom lay the glowing power core, its soft hum resonating in the cavern. Vecta hesitated. "How do we get down there without breaking ourselves?" Terex squawked softly, considering their options. Before he could answer, Elias's voice echoed through their comms. "Sometimes the best way forward isn't the safest. Humans call it controlled risk. Use what you have and think creatively." The two aliens exchanged a glance before deciding to slide down on a piece of discarded material they found nearby. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. As they landed near the power core, Terex winced, rubbing his side. "Controlled risk," he muttered. "Humans are insane. The weight of adversity." With the power core secured, their next challenge was the return trip. Carrying the core proved difficult, it was heavier than it appeared, and the cold made every movement more exhausting. Vecta faltered first, her crystalline body dimming further. I can't go on," she said weakly, her form shivering. Terex stopped, his feathers drooping. He wasn't much better off. The cold gnawed at his muscles, and the weight of the core seemed impossible to bear. For a moment, he considered giving up. But then Elias's earlier words echoed in his mind, "Unseen strength keeps us alive." Terex straightened, his determination hardening. "No," he said firmly. "We're not stopping. If humans can endure this, so can we." He crouched down and adjusted the power core, taking more of the weight onto himself. "Lean on me, Vecta. We'll make it together." The crystalline alien hesitated, then complied, her glowing form brightening slightly as Terex steadied her. Slowly but surely, they began their ascent. A lesson in perseverance. When Terex and Vecta finally emerged from the cavern, they were greeted by cheers from the other students. Elias stood at the entrance, his expression unreadable but his eyes filled with approval. "Well done," he said simply, taking the power core from Terex's trembling hands. "What did you learn?" Terex, panting and shivering, glanced at Vecta, who gave a faint pulse of light. "That humans are stubborn beyond belief," he said with a weak chuckle. "And that strength isn't just muscles. It's refusing to give up." Elias nodded. "Exactly. Physical strength is important, but it's your will to keep going that truly defines survival. Humans call it resilience. It's what allows us to thrive in environments that would otherwise kill us." The students murmured among themselves, their admiration for humans growing with each lesson. To them, resilience wasn't just a trait, it was a superpower. The aftermath. Later, as the group dispersed, Vecta approached Terex. "You didn't have to carry me," she said softly. "You could have left me there and saved yourself." Terex fluffed his feathers, his expression embarrassed. "Maybe. But I think I finally understand humans a little better. They don't leave anyone behind, even when it's hard. And I didn't want to either." From a distance, Elias watched them, a faint smile on his face. He had seen this transformation before, the spark of something greater than survival, camaraderie. It was the unseen strength that humans valued most. The value of vulnerability. The students gathered in the lecture hall once again, their murmurs a mixture of curiosity and lingering awe from the previous session. Captain Elias entered with a quiet confidence, carrying an unusual item, a transparent sphere filled with swirling water, tiny bubbles rising and falling like stars in motion. He set it on the desk and faced the group. "Today," Elias began, his voice calm yet compelling, "we'll discuss vulnerability. In survival, it's often seen as a weakness. But sometimes, embracing it is the greatest strength." The students exchanged puzzled glances. Terex raised a wing hesitantly. "How can being vulnerable be a strength? Isn't survival about staying strong?" Elias nodded thoughtfully. "That's what most think. But vulnerability isn't about being weak, it's about being honest with yourself and others. It's about knowing when to rely on those around you. Let me show you what I mean. A story of trust." Elias began recounting a mission from his past. He and his team had been stranded on a hostile planet after their shuttle crash-landed. The environment was harsh, a sweltering jungle teeming with venomous creatures and unpredictable storms. Supplies were limited, and tensions ran high among the crew. "I was the leader," Elias said, his gaze distant as he recalled the memory. "I was supposed to have all the answers, to keep everyone alive. But as the days wore on, I realized something, I didn't have the strength to do it alone." He explained how he gathered his crew one night around a flickering campfire. The team was worn down, their faces gaunt with exhaustion and fear. For the first time, Elias admitted that he was struggling, that he didn't have all the solutions. The students leaned forward, captivated by the rare glimpse of human vulnerability. "What happened next?" Vecta asked softly. Elias smiled faintly. "Something incredible. My team didn't see my admission as a failure. They saw it as a call to action. By admitting my limits, I gave them the courage to step up. We worked together, combining our strengths and compensating for each other's weaknesses. And because of that, we survived. A demonstration of trust." Elias gestured to the swirling sphere on the desk. "This represents trust. It's delicate and fluid, but it's also one of the strongest forces in the universe." He invited two students to the front, Terex and Gareth, the reptilian alien. "Hold this," Elias instructed, handing the sphere to Terex. "Now pass it to Gareth." The two exchanged the sphere carefully, their movements slow and deliberate. Elias nodded. "See how you're both being careful. That's because you know it's fragile. Trust works the same way. It must be handled with care, but when nurtured, it can withstand incredible pressure. Terex tilted his head. But what does trust have to do with survival? Elias's smile widened. Everything. When you trust those around you, you create a bond that makes you stronger together than you could ever be alone. Vulnerability allows trust to form. A challenge of dependence. To reinforce the lesson, Elias set up a practical exercise. The students were paired off and blindfolded, one acting as the guide while the other navigated an obstacle course. The catch? The blindfolded student had to rely entirely on their partner's instructions to avoid hazards and complete the course. Terex and Vecta partnered up, as usual. Terex was blindfolded first, his feathers twitching nervously. "Are you sure about this?" he muttered. "Trust me," Vecta said, her voice steady. As they moved through the course, Terex stumbled at first, his instincts fighting against the vulnerability of relying on someone else. But as Vecta's precise guidance steered him safely around obstacles, he began to relax. By the time they reached the end, he removed the blindfold with a triumphant squawk. "We did it." When it was Vecta's turn, she hesitated. Her glowing form flickered, a sign of doubt. "I'm not sure I can do this." Terex placed a reassuring wing on her shoulder. "If I can trust you, you can trust me. Let's go." With his encouragement, Vecta moved cautiously through the course, relying entirely on Terex's instructions. Despite her initial fear, she reached the end, her glow pulsing brightly. "I never thought I could do that," she said, her voice filled with wonder. The lesson sinks in. As the exercise concluded, Elias gathered the group and addressed them. "What did you learn today?" Terex spoke up first, his tone uncharacteristically serious. "That trust isn't just about the other person, it's about letting yourself be vulnerable enough to need them." Elias nodded, his expression warm. "Exactly. Survival isn't a solo endeavor. The strongest among us are those who know when to lean on others." The students left the session deep in thought, their understanding of humanity's resilience and interconnectedness growing. For Terex and the others, this lesson wasn't just about survival, it was about life itself. Trust, vulnerability, and unity were not just human traits, they were universal. The trial of fire. The air in the lecture hall crackled with anticipation. Captain Elias stood before the alien students, his calm demeanor masking the gravity of what was to come. Today's session was different, the stakes were higher. Behind him, the wall shimmered with holographic projections of fire, ash, and chaos. "Today," Elias began, his voice steady, "we face the trial of fire. It's a lesson in chaos, adaptability, and the will to endure when everything around you falls apart." The students exchanged uneasy glances. Terex fluffed his feathers nervously. "What kind of trial?" he asked. Elias smiled faintly. "A controlled simulation of a ship-wide fire. Your task will be to work together, adapt to the changing environment, and save as many lives as possible. Remember, chaos doesn't wait for you to be ready, it simply happens." Into the flames. The simulation began abruptly, plunging the students into a holographic replica of a burning starship. The air was thick with simulated smoke, and the shrill sound of alarms echoed in their ears. The corridors flickered with artificial flames, casting eerie shadows. Terex and Vecta were grouped with Gareth, the reptilian, and Renara, an aquatic being encased in a mobile water-filled exosuit. Their objective was clear: locate and evacuate simulated survivors scattered throughout the ship. "Stick together." Elias's voice came through their comms. "The environment will change, and you'll need to adapt quickly." The group moved cautiously, their eyes darting around for signs of danger. They found their first survivor, a holographic humanoid trapped under debris. Gareth's powerful claws made short work of lifting the wreckage, while Vecta stabilized the figure using a holographic version of the first aid techniques Elias had taught them. Good work, Elias said through the comms. Now get them to safety. When plans fail. As the group moved deeper into the simulation, the environment became more treacherous. Explosions rattled the corridors, and the fire's spread seemed unpredictable. Suddenly, a section of the ceiling collapsed, cutting off their path. What now? Renara's voice quivered, her water-filled suit sloshing as she turned to Terex. Terex hesitated, his feathers bristling. We find another way. Humans don't give up when things go wrong, they improvise. Gareth spotted a maintenance hatch nearby. Through there, he growled, already prying it open. The group squeezed into the tight crawlspace, navigating the labyrinthine passages. The heat was stifling, even in the simulation. Vecta's glow dimmed, and Renara's suit emitted warning beeps as the heat threatened to compromise its integrity. Keep moving. Terex urged, his own exhaustion mounting. We can't stop here. A critical decision. As they emerged from the crawlspace, they found themselves in a large chamber filled with flickering holographic flames. 2 survivors were visible, one near the exit, and another trapped under heavy debris on the far side of the room. The heat was overwhelming, and their time was running out. We can't save both, Gareth said bluntly, his reptilian eyes narrowing. Terex glanced at Vecta, whose dimming glow showed her struggle, and at Renara, whose suit alarms were growing louder. He took a deep breath, recalling Elias's lessons on sacrifice and prioritization. We split up, Terex decided. Gareth, take Renara and get the one near the exit. Vecta and I will handle the other. The group hesitated, but Terex's resolve was clear. They moved quickly, each pair racing against time. Terex and Vecta reached the trapped survivor, but the debris was heavier than expected. We can't move this alone, Vecta said, her voice tinged with despair. Terex clenched his beak, pushing with all his strength. We don't leave anyone behind. Help me. Together, they managed to shift the debris just enough to free the survivor. As the holographic figure staggered to its feet, Terex and Vecta supported it, their movements slow and laborious. The final stretch. Both groups reunited near the exit, the survivors leaning heavily on their rescuers. The simulated fire roared louder, and the path to safety was rapidly closing. Go! Terex shouted, urging Gareth and Renara forward. We'll cover the rear. The group barely made it through the final corridor as the simulation ended. The holographic fire vanished, replaced by cool air and the quiet hum of the lecture hall. The students collapsed to the floor, panting and trembling. A lesson in chaos. Elias stepped forward, his expression unreadable. You succeeded, he said simply. But tell me, what did you learn? Terex, still catching his breath, spoke first. That chaos is overwhelming. But, we can adapt. We can find a way. Vecta nodded, her glow returning to its normal brightness. And sometimes, the hardest decisions are the right ones. We couldn't save everyone, but we did what we could. Elias smiled, his eyes gleaming with pride. Exactly. Survival isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. It's about making the best choices in the worst situations and never giving up. The students sat quietly, reflecting on the experience. For them, the trial of fire wasn't just a test, it was a glimpse into the resilience that defined humanity. As they left the hall, Terex turned to Vecta and said, humans really are insane. But maybe, that's why they're so inspiring. Vecta's glow pulsed warmly. I think we could all learn something from their madness. The human spirit. The final session was held in the station's open atrium, where a holographic projection of Earth's vibrant blue and green surface filled the space above the students. Captain Elias stood at the center, hands behind his back, his expression a mixture of pride and solemnity. Today, Elias began, his voice resonating with purpose, is not a lesson. It's a reflection. Over the past sessions, you've seen what humans endure, what we value, and how we survive. Now, I want to leave you with the most important thing about humanity, the spirit that drives us. The students listened intently, their experiences over the past weeks sharpening their understanding of this enigmatic species. Terex, Vecta, Gareth, and Renara stood together, their bond strengthened by the challenges they had faced. A story of hope. Elias began recounting one of humanity's most defining moments, the story of the first Mars colonists. It was a time when Earth was divided by borders and ideologies, he said. But when it came to exploring the stars, humanity found unity. The students leaned in as Elias painted a vivid picture of the early pioneers who braved the unknown. The first Martian settlers weren't soldiers or explorers, they were farmers, engineers, and scientists. People who believed in building a future beyond the confines of their world. He described the hardships they faced, dwindling resources, deadly sandstorms, and isolation. There were moments when failure seemed inevitable. But what kept them going was their belief in something greater, a future they might never see but knew was worth fighting for. The strength of unity. Elias gestured to the holographic Earth above them. That's what defines humanity. We face adversity not as individuals but as a collective. We thrive because we unite in the face of challenges, lifting each other up when we falter. Gareth raised a clawed hand. But humans are still flawed. You've shown us your strengths, but what about your weaknesses? Elias nodded thoughtfully. You're right. Humans are flawed. We make mistakes, we fight, and sometimes we fail to live up to our ideals. But those flaws are what make us strive to be better. Our resilience isn't just about surviving, it's about growing. Adapting. Overcoming not just external challenges but our own limitations. Tarek spoke up, his feathers puffed with curiosity. So, survival isn't just about the body. It's about the mind and the heart. Elias smiled. Exactly. Survival is as much about hope as it is about strength. And hope is a uniquely human trait that we choose to nurture, even when everything seems lost. A parting challenge. For the final activity, Elias presented each student with a holographic recorder. Your task, he said, is to record a message to your future selves. Reflect on what you've learned, how you've grown, and what you'll carry forward. The students scattered across the atrium, each finding a quiet corner to compose their thoughts. Tarek sat beside Vecta, the soft glow of her crystalline form illuminating his feathers. What are you going to say? He asked. Vecta pulsed faintly, a sign of contemplation. That strength isn't just about me anymore. It's about who I can count on. Tarek nodded. For me, it's that survival isn't just about staying alive, it's about living with purpose. The legacy of humanity. As the students returned, Elias gathered them once more. Your reflections are your own, he said. But remember this, what you've learned here isn't just about humans. It's about all of us. Resilience, trust, and hope, these aren't uniquely human traits. They're universal. And together, they make us stronger. He gestured to the projection of Earth, which transformed to display the vast galaxy. The stars aren't just for humans. They're for all of us. And together, we can achieve things greater than any one species could alone. The students erupted into applause, their admiration for humanity, and for Elias, overflowing. Terex turned to Vecta, his feathers ruffling in excitement. Maybe humans aren't insane. Maybe they're just different. Vecta pulsed brightly. Different. And inspiring. As the session ended, the students left with a renewed sense of purpose, their perceptions of humanity forever changed. Captain Elias watched them go, a small smile on his face. For him, the lessons weren't just about survival, they were about building bridges between species, one story at a time.